Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to be here. I am so grateful to all of our TED organizers. Would you give them a hand? You have no idea how hard these people have worked. And give yourselves a hand for being here. Are we ready to get this show on the road? I'm as ready as I will ever be. The only reason to ever give a speech is to change the world. John F. Kennedy said that, and I happen to agree, and that's what I'm here to do today. I'm here to change my world, to give you tools to change yours, so that we can create a world that works for everyone. How many of you have seen this photograph? Show of hands. Okay, for those of you not familiar, it was November 14, 2012, New York City, Times Square, the coldest day of the season, 35 degrees. Police officer Larry DePrimo was walking his beat, and he was freezing. He's wearing a pair of boots and a couple of pairs of socks and felt like his feet were still freezing when he came across this homeless gentleman, Jeffrey Hillman. As he looked down at Mr. Hillman, he saw blisters the size of his palm on the bottom of this gentleman's feet. His heart went out to him. So he went to a nearby shoe store, bought a pair of boots and some socks, and as he leaned down and was giving the boots to Mr. Hillman, an Arizona tourist happened to be walking by and snapped that photograph. You see, her father was a police officer who was known for his acts of kindness. So she was touched by the kindness of the officer. She sent a letter of thanks to NYPD along with the photograph. They put it on their Facebook page, and within days, it had gone viral. It's an awesome story, isn't it? Heartwarming. I thought so too, and as I read the comments on the bottom, people were saying things like, it brought me to tears. And gosh, there really are still good people in the world. And this restores my faith in humanity. And as I was reading those comments, something really bothered me about them. You see, I come from a family of law enforcement officers. My dad was a New York City police officer. My uncle was a police officer with NYPD. I am married to a retired 32-year veteran of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. And our daughter has just decided to follow in the footsteps of her father and both grandfathers. You see, I know that acts like this are not isolated incidents. I know that in every municipality, in every city around this country, there are police officers who act with kindness and compassion every day. Not for a pat on the back, not for a promotion, not to make the news, but because that is who they are. And it's not just police officers who are kind. At the time that incident happened, I was working for a social service agency that was dedicated to engaging communities to protect families and children and protect kids from abuse and neglect. And I was hearing stories of amazing kindness on a daily basis. I was experiencing them myself. And these are people, I'm talking about teachers, social workers, construction workers, teenagers, young kids, just people of all walks of life that are kind and wonderful and generous. In fact, some of the very kindest people I know are in this room right now. You all know who you are. People are kind, again, not to get recognition, but because that's part of who we are. And if you're not as convinced of that as I am, I hope you will be by the end of my talk. See, those comments like, it restored my faith in humanity, were disturbing to me, and it hurt me because I happen to have a lot of faith in humanity. And I wondered, why don't people see things the way I do? Why does it bother me that people see the world in such a dark way? Why should it bother you? And what, if anything, can we do to change that perspective? So I decided to do some research, some of which may not be real surprising for you. The area that I first started was with the news. Now, how many people watch the news on a regular basis? Raise your hands. Either watch the news, read newspapers. Even if you don't watch the news, if you're on social media, you are probably pretty up with what's going on in the world. You feel like you know what's going on. Did you know that bad news stories outweigh positive news stories by 17 to 1? Now, do you think that's because the world is an inherently bad place? Or could it be that bad news sells? Do you ever think about the effect that all of that bad news is having on your mind, on your overall enjoyment of life, on your physical health? Well, there are people who are studying this very thing. And as it turns out, the result of this unrelenting flow of negativity is pretty dramatic. People who watch a lot of news, who read the newspapers and are inundated with this bad news have increased anxiety. They experience increased sadness. There's a researcher out of the University of Texas, Austin, by the name of Mary McNaughton Castle. And she studies the effect of media consumption and stress and what it does to people. And what she has found is that increased media consumption leads to an increased sense of helplessness and a negative worldview. It also causes people to catastrophize their personal problems, which is a fancy way of saying when you make a mountain out of a molehill. So what can we do about this? McNaughton Castle, and she is the one that used that phrase, the unrelenting flow of negativity. She said, she encourages people to consciously be aware of the fact that what you are watching on the news is not the norm. It is the exception. That's what makes it news, if you think about it. So that is her suggestion. Remind yourself, and I invite you all to think about your own lives and think about how your lives compare with what you see in the news. The fact that you happen to be here in a TEDx talk, listening to me speak, or online hearing me speak, means that you have a lot more resources than the rest of the world. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you all probably have more blessings in your lives than you could even count. So what do we do? The fact of the matter is that all of this negativity, even though we're seeing the world as if it is such a dark place, the fact is that we are right here, right now, in this 21st century, living in the safest time that man has ever known. Y'all believe me? Yeah, good. Because it takes some convincing. For some people, it really takes convincing. The person who's gathered probably the most information, the most effective information, is a professor by the name of Steven Pinker out of Harvard University. Steven has written a book called Better Angels of Our Nature. The central thesis of his book is that our era is less violent, less cruel, more peaceful than any previous time of human existence. People living now are less likely to meet a violent death or to suffer from violence or cruelty at the hands of others than people living in any previous century. If you're still not convinced, watch his TED Talk. But think about this. There was a time in our history when men fought to the death, and it was considered sport. There was a time when slavery was the norm. There was a time when women and children were considered property. How many of you are familiar with the term rule of thumb? The rule of thumb meant that a man could beat his wife with a stick as long as it was no thicker than his thumb. Did you know that the laws to prevent the abuse of children evolved out of animal maltreatment legislation? It was illegal to mistreat your animals before there was any penalty for killing your own children. So yes, we are living in the safest time there is. So how do we reconcile all of this information? Well, I guess the first thing you could do is stop watching the news. I hear the laughter, right? Some of you are having heart palpitations, like you have to have your daily dose of headlines and horror. The other thing you could do, if you're not willing to give up your news, is to watch with more mindfulness and with more awareness of the fact that what you are seeing in the news is news because it is exceptional, because it's not the norm. There is a third thing you can do, but I'm going to tell you about that in a little while. I want to share another story with you first. A friend of mine was going through a drive-thru, made her order, came up to the window, and when she came to the window was told, "Oh, you don't owe anything. The guy in front of you paid your tab. She was like, what? How awesome is that? So she said she really did this. She turned around, looked behind her, make sure it was not like a football team, you know, a busload of people. And it wasn't, it was one person. So she said, I will pay for his. And she could see the people inside the restaurant were amused by this statement. So she said, well, what's so funny? They said, it's been going on for 45 minutes. Now, doesn't that make you feel warm and fuzzy inside? That true story illustrates 3 very important things about kindness. Number 1, there are very tangible benefits to kindness. That warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you watch those TV shows and people are getting their homes remade, or you hear a great story like that, it means that there are hormones being secreted in your body, oxytocin and serotonin. Oxytocin is a feel-good hormone that decreases blood pressure, increases the health of your heart, it decreases the free radicals in your system. It's a feel-good hormone. Serotonin decreases anxiety and depression. It's like your natural antidepressant. People who are kind live longer, healthier lives. They get what's called a helper's high that increases the immune system so that they live longer lives. Now, here's an interesting thing. You all kind of felt that warm, fuzzy thing, right? But you were not the ones that were the givers or the recipients of the kindness. You see, I got ahead of myself. The observers of kindness get as much benefit as the people who are doing the kindness or receiving the kindness. Now, when you start young, it's even better. Because here are the results. Here's what we see for teenagers. And teenagers right now, young people are the group that is most at risk. Our young people are the ones who are starting to take more of these antipsychotic medications and are starting to deal with mental health issues at an unprecedented level. Teens who are kind suffer less depression and suicide. They are less involved in risky behaviors. They are less likely to fail in school. They experience increased self-esteem, greater social competence, and they are happier and more engaged. As an aside, kindness makes us more attractive. So if you're having issues in the relationship department, consider being a little kinder. You might find yourself a date, or who knows, even a life mate. As I said, just watching kindness, just observing the kindness of others gives us that warm, fuzzy, happy feeling. It gives us the benefits of kindness, and I just love that picture. The third very important thing about kindness is that kindness is contagious. There's lots of evidence to show that a single act of kindness has that ripple effect and can generate dozens more. There is a flip side to that as well. See, kindness spreads through social networks like a virus, like a very wonderful, awesome virus, the best kind you want to get. But other things spread through social networks like viruses as well. Things like loneliness, things like selfishness, even suicide, we find spreads through social networks. There is another TED Talk speaker by the name of Gary Slutkin, who is an epidemiologist out of Chicago, and he is now studying violence and how violence spreads through networks with very deadly and drastic consequences. So what do we choose? What do we choose, right? Here's what I know. Energy flows where attention goes. And what do I mean with that? I mean that the places, the areas where you focus your attention are going to grow in your awareness. Another friend of mine was in the market for a vehicle. She goes to the dealership and she finds the perfect powder blue Camry. She's never seen one like it. She falls in love with this car. She buys it. What do you think she sees as she's driving off the lot? And how many did she see between the dealership and her house? This is what happens. You see, where we place our attention, where our energy flows where attention goes, and it grows in your conscious awareness, whether it is objectively true or not. Understand the phrase, it is done unto you as you believe. It doesn't say it's done unto you as you deserve. It's not done unto you as you want. It's not done unto you as you would like. It is done unto you as you believe. And when you believe the world is a dark and terrible, dangerous place, your mind is going to grasp every bit of evidence it can to make that true for you, whether it is the objective truth or not. So what do we do with all of this information? I invite you, 3 very, very simple things that we can do. Kindness is the cure. How easy is it? The first thing you can do, very first thing, I invite you to become aware and start to notice the kindness that is every day in this moment happening all around you. And what you seek, you will find. But if you don't, say you don't happen to see that kindness in your day-to-day world, what else can you do? You can be kind. Anyone can be kind. Doesn't matter your race, your religion, doesn't matter how old you are, how much money you have. Anyone can be kind. And you never know the effect a smile, a kind word, a nice gesture can have on the life of another person. We need to be the change that we want to see in this world. The third thing you can do is you can spread kindness. Maybe you don't want to tell people the stories of kindness that you've done because you're not doing it for that pat on the back. But talk about other people's kindness. Tell about your friends. Share it on social media. November 13th, it's Friday the 13th, is World Kindness Day. I invite you to take that day and flood social media with stories of good and stories of kindness. No blaming, no complaining, no politics, no, oh, poor me. Just good stories and stories of kindness, and watch how your world changes. You can be your own kindness. You can start your own kindness revolution. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And so I invite you to make kindness the cure. Be that kindness. Because if not now, then when? And if not you and me, then who? Kindness is the cure. Thank you.